5 years ago, the first tool lending library in the state of Illinois opened its doors for business. Or should I say door? We had one door. It opened into about 100-ish square foot closet in the back of a one-room office building right here on the west side of Bloomington. Now, I know that this doesn't really look or sound like much, but trust me, to a 21-year-old college junior, that was pretty sweet. Just 9 months before, we had nothing. 10 months before, I had never even heard of a tool library. In case you haven't either, think book library, but instead of books, power tools. We did our first tool loan that day too, and even though I don't remember exactly what it was, I guess that doesn't really matter. Could have been a hammer, screwdriver, nail gun, make it whatever you want. What mattered was that it actually happened. What mattered was that we were on our way. Now fast forward to today, and that same tool library now operates in a 6,000 square foot facility, has done 9,500 tool loans, hosts do-it-yourself workshops, has built and donated 140 beds for kids in our community, and has an amazing group of dedicated volunteers. Now, this was a Facebook post from back in December, and it's a prompt. It reads, "Because of the tool library, Because of the tool library, I've been able to work on my first home without spending hundreds on tools that I needed. I've been able to replace my smoke detectors, secure paneling in my mudroom to reduce drafts, build 2 raised beds for a garden, sand, and repaint a free dining room table to look beautiful. Because of the tool library, we get stuff done. Buying an old building is a daunting task, but having the tool library down the street from us has made it that much easier. The tool library has given me the opportunity to get more involved in my community, meet some amazing friends, and has helped me with countless projects that I couldn't have completed without the tools and resources at their shop." Now, I'm tempted to stand up here for the next 15-ish minutes and simply read testimonials, because honestly, this is what it's all about. These are the stories that we should be sharing. And while I'm not going to do that, don't worry, my hope is that what this illustrates is we can measure the success of the tool library through statistics, like we did on the slide before, but we can also measure the success of the tool library through stories. And so I think the obvious question here is, how did this all happen? How did we go from this to this, and then ultimately to the thriving and dynamic organization that we are today? Now, to tell that story in all of its necessary detail, giving credit to all of the necessary people, we would need a lot more time than we have here tonight. And so instead, with the time that we do have, what I'm interested in is whether or not the tool library can serve as a model for others that want to take an idea and actually make it happen. I'd like to try to package up a handful of lessons from my tool library experience and share them so that hopefully others can take them, transform their idea into reality, rinse and repeat. So the guiding question here is, how do we boil this thing down? Reduce it into a generic enough form that anyone can use to launch a big idea. I was a community intern. It was the summer of 2012, and I was working for the Illinois Wesleyan Action Research Center when I first learned about the concept of tool lending. I thought it was awesome. To me, it checked all the boxes of what a good community project should look like. But what did I know? I had zero experience with community work. I had definitely never started a nonprofit. I had never even tried to launch my own business. In my head, it was hard to see myself as being qualified. In my head, I was cool with Matt the accounting student, or Matt the soccer player, or even Matt the sometimes does community service person. But I was definitely not Matt the community crusader, grassroots nonprofit leader, social entrepreneurship poster child. What I needed was a nudge. What I needed was permission. Permission to see myself in a new way. Ultimately, that came from Deborah. Deborah's the director of the Action Research Center, and I was working for her that summer. Now, anyone that knows Deborah knows you don't really work for her. You work with her. But maybe better said, Deborah works with you. She has an ability to come alongside your project, nudging it, shaping it, forming it, and you at the same time. Deborah was the first person to say yes. I give you permission to be a community leader. The first person to say yes. I give you permission to make this happen. And the first person to say yes to this kind of crazy tool library idea. And along the way, there were many more yes people who breathed positive energy into the project, who opened doors, connected, corrected, and perfected the tool library. There was Sharon, Rick, Robert, Katie Rose, Danny, Todd, John, and so many more people. And so the takeaway here is find your yes people. Build your team and surround yourself with those that give you permission, who give you permission to be great, who give you permission to see yourself in a new way, and who give you permission to ultimately take your ideas and make them happen. Now, ideas, we have them all the time, right? They float around in our head, and they usually come out as questions like, wouldn't it be cool if? Or what if there was a thing that? Or wouldn't that be so much better if only? But a lot of times that's about as far as we go into actually making them real. With the tool library, I was determined not to just let it be a fleeting thought. That idea floating in my head, I had to give it somewhere to land. I had to take that idea down from where only I could experience it and had to put it somewhere that others could interact with it too. And so, true to my millennial roots, I made a Facebook page and built a website and had a friend design me a logo. And while these are by no means earth-shattering, groundbreaking things, what they did was they gave the tool library an identity. Tool library wasn't even a real thing at this point, but it now had a face, it had a name, and it had a landing page. And even though we had no idea where its physical location would ultimately be, we now had a virtual location that anyone in the world could enter. And so next time you hear yourself ask one of those questions, grab it, pull it down, and give it somewhere to land. When you have a great idea but you don't know where to even start here. Make that idea look and feel so real that the conversation shifts from wouldn't that be super cool to that is super cool. Now, when we picture our ideas, we usually see them in their best and final phase. I don't think we normally picture our projects in that in-between phase, in the awkward, we have a tiny closet and a handful of donated tools phase. And so when we go to actually make our idea real, that gap seems insurmountable. How am I supposed to go from nothing to what I have in my head? We get hung up on the fact that we can't create it exactly how we see it right now. We stop before we even get started because we decide we'll hold out until everything falls into place. In our mind, we see a day when the money and the time and the expertise will all line up perfectly. And we tell ourselves that's when we'll seize the day. And I was no different. In my mind, what I saw was a full-blown hardware store. I didn't see this sheet of pegboard with just a few hammers. But we didn't have the money to rent a commercial space right away. We didn't have the time either. If we waited too long, the idea, it would become stale. The momentum would be lost. So we had to embrace the awkward phase. We had to find value in the awkward phase. The awkward phase did was it gave us a chance to assess the long-term viability of the project, to assess the scope and the magnitude of what we were truly undertaking. And so while your end goal might look a whole lot different than where your means allow you to start. There's value there too. Embrace that. Now at some point, either from the get-go, but most likely as you start to leave the awkward phase, this project is going to become very real. And our lives in their current form are full of commitments. They're full of obligations. Maybe that's a family or a job or school or all of the above. But chances are, this new project, this new now very real thing, it's probably not already baked into your life. Chances are it's going to disrupt your schedule, your flow, your routine. Maybe that project you've been working on at your job is starting to gain traction and require overtime. Maybe that small business you've been trying to get off the ground starts to require night and weekend attention. For me, it was the balancing and the juggling and the multitasking of school and college soccer and late night work shifts. Now I had an extra 20 hours a week of volunteer coordinating, staffing store hours, sorting donations, developing workshops, and all sorts of other things. Dwelling on that would have been enough to stop this thing in its tracks. But what I learned was to brace for disruption, not to focus on it, to mentally prepare for the feeling of imbalance and unsettledness in my day, but not to let it drive my day. The mental game of learning to adjust, and then readjust some more, to run with it on the fly, that takes time. So brace for disruption, but don't let it be the reason that you don't try. Pretty soon you'll find out that it becomes embedded. It becomes your new routine. So let your project fill the nooks and crannies of your day, or be more intentional and give it a chunk of your schedule. Chances are this new project will probably add more time to your day, result in less sleep during the week. But from my experience, it also leads to an often untapped energy source called passion. And maybe that's the biggest lesson here of all, passion. We talk about it very generically all the time. We say things like, you should pursue your passion. And we ask things like, what are you passionate about? And we usually get very generic responses like, I'm passionate about art or music or sports or business. But to me, a lot of times that translates into, I'm not really sure. And that is perfectly okay. If you had asked Matt LaLonde what his passions were at the beginning of sophomore year, there's definitely no chance he says tool lending. It would probably be something more like an I don't know response. But maybe that's exactly how it needed to be. Maybe by not already defining the things that I cared about, that created the perfect set of circumstances to be open to a new idea. So be weary of the pressure to categorize and identify your passions, the things you care about. If you think something's cool, just explore it. Sometimes your passions have a strange way of revealing themselves. And so I urge you, find your yes people. Give your ideas somewhere to land. Embrace the awkward phase, brace for disruption, explore cool ideas, but most importantly, visit your local tool library. Thank you.